you all for the introductions and for having me here. It's nice to be able to just sit around the table. In preparing, you never know if it's going to be a big room and lots of people, but this is kind of a different environment. Here's where I'm coming from, just to let you know, the state of Kentucky in the United States, right there in the blue, kind of in the middle, landlocked. I'm actually from Georgia, which is 2 states south, and I've been in Kentucky now for 7 years, but I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. Mm-hmm. So that's my perspective. So Lorenzo asked me to talk about, for the summer school, about why people travel, so motivation for travel, which is kind of funny because it's not something I've ever really thought about. I study motivation for school, so I work in education. I was a teacher. I was first a French teacher, so I had sort of a language interest and background, and then I became a middle school teacher, a 5th grade teacher. And then I started studying motivation and why it is learners do what they do and teachers do what they do. But I've also traveled a good bit, and so thinking about motivation as I work in education and applying it to the act of traveling has been a very interesting process. And I'm sure that because all of you have traveled extensively, it's clear, you'll have other perspectives on this that I think will make this a rich conversation, I hope. So I've organized my talk in 3 parts. The first part is focused on motivation and on the question of what motivates us to travel. Why do we go? Why do humans go? I'll talk to you about 5 theories of motivation. This first part will be the biggest part of my talk today, so I'll spend a lot of time on that. The second part will be to talk about learning. So what are some of the things that happen when we are traveling that are really important to us? I think what we'll find is the way we learn becomes another source of our motivation. We can talk about that at the end. And the third part, which is just very brief, is really kind of closing in terms of looking back on our travels and what they bring to us in retrospect. So let's start here. What motivates us to travel? So I'll just ask you to take a minute, and I've got a little timer down here. Take a minute to answer this, to fill in this sentence. I travel because. You can write down an answer, just think about it. Think about the reasons that you travel. You might think about the next time you're going somewhere and why. Let's just go around in the circle and just share one reason why you travel.
Okay, I travel because I'm curious to know more, to learn.
Okay.
I travel because I need inspiration.
To change the environment in order to relax and to rest.
To change your own environment?
Mm-hmm.
Because I wish to explore new culture and enjoy new places.
To meet colleagues.
Have new experiences.
Meet new people.
Yeah, to meet people or to show the world to my kids.
Mm-hmm. So here are some others. Food, language. Of course, you mentioned this, several of you. Maybe to see how other people live. To be exposed to something that's different than what you are normally exposed to. And that could be in terms of ideas, it could be in terms of the physical surroundings, the physical landscape. Maybe you have a social goal. Like I want to be the first person to go to South Africa in my family, or to go wherever, or to do something. You might travel for a physical reason. Or maybe you just don't feel like you're learning enough where you are, so you want to be forced to learn more. Or it could be even a deeper motive, like to change who you are in the eyes of others, or to see yourself reflected in a different way, through a different cultural setting. So I think just going around the room and looking at some of these, we can already, right at the beginning, decide the motives, the reasons for why we would travel are diverse and they're complex. And to make it more complicated, they can be competing. So it's not just that you have one motive, you just told me just one, but you've got many that are acting on you all the time. So it's hard to get to the bottom of that. I'll refer to the work of Abraham Maslow a lot today, and he said that the overt behavior may be very similar, but the motivations may be extremely different. So we might think of someone visiting, I'm hoping this is a World Heritage Site, the Great Wall of China. But we can't look at that act and say, oh, you went to the Great Wall of China. You probably did that because we really can't know. I mean, on the left we've got a guy who maybe he went for very personal, either spiritual or familial reasons. And on the right we've got someone who was just trying to check something off the list. Like, yeah, I did one more. Or, yeah, I get to say that I went to the Great Wall. So the outward behavior is not a good indicator of the internal motive. This causes problems for researchers because we can't know someone's motive by just watching what they do. We have to get into their heads. It's sometimes hard. So just five. There are more than 5 theories of human motivation. So I've had to select just 5. And probably that's too many, but we'll see. We'll see how you handle the 5. And just very briefly, and you don't need to write it down or anything, but this is them. The first one has to do with being motivated by a need. So we have needs. The second has to do with being motivated to self-determine our future. Or we want to be self-determining. The third has to do with what we expect and what we value. The fourth has to do with goals. And I think the fifth does a nice job putting it all together. Even though, there's definitely overlap in all of these theories. They're not just hanging out and by themselves. So let's begin with this Abraham Maslow's theory of motivation. Doesn't really have a name. He wrote a lot about the topic of motivation. But under each theory as I present them, I'll put a driving question that I think the theory tries to answer. And the driving question for Maslow was, what are my primary needs at this point in my life? Just by show of hands, how many of you know of Abraham Maslow? A little bit? Oh, okay. No? Good. I'm glad you don't know. How about you? What do you know about him?
About the pyramid.
The pyramid? Yeah? Okay. So, okay, that's where I'm going. By the way, fun fact, Abraham Maslow never drew a pyramid. This is totally people who have read him. He described what he called prepotent, more powerful needs. So he described a hierarchy, but he didn't put it in a pyramid. But we're going to. So at the bottom of the pyramid that you often see, or the very most basic needs that we have as humans, are physiological needs. So if you've ever been somewhere where you could not go to the bathroom, or you did not have enough food or water, you realize how having a basic need blinds you to everything else. It becomes the most important thing for you at that time. Almost always. So that was why he put it kind of as the most potent need we have is the very most basic need we have. Moving up from there is our need for safety. So we have a need to feel safe where we are, a need to feel like we're healthy, like we're not in great danger, either physically or in our environment, shelter, whatnot. We have a need for love and belonging. This is a big one. Many of us stop here, I think, and we don't reach these higher motives that he talks about, or we spend a lot of time needing in this area. I need to belong. I need to fit in. I need you to love me back. I need to feel taken care of or loved in someone else's eyes. Humans spend a great deal of energy meeting these needs. Facebook? Just an example. And related to that is this need to feel a sense of esteem for ourselves. So this is more than just self-esteem, but it's a sense of I'm good, I can do things, I have a sense of power, I have a sense of agency, I'm competent, other people respect me. Very important motive. So these are kind of the first category of needs that he describes, and I'll explain that in a second. At the very top, and the ultimate driving force in our lives is the need to become self-actualized, which Maslow describes in a lot of different ways, but I think we could probably summarize it as the need to be your best self. That there's some ideal you out there. There's you and your best self, just being fully you, whatever it means. And ultimately that will be a motive for you, to be that best self that you can be. So if we classify these two groups, the lower four categories make up what Maslow described as deficiency needs or deficiency motives. Their absence makes us sick. If we don't feel like we've had those needs met, we're not feeling healthy. We tend to be ill in some way, psychologically, physically. The top part, the self-actualization, is what he describes as a growth need or a growth motive. So both of these are at play all the time in our lives, and it's not like we go in order and check, I feel safe, I got my physiological needs met, I can move on to love. We're going back and forth in this thing the whole time, which is why the pyramid, I don't think really works, because it's more complex than that. But I do think the idea that we have deficiency motives and higher order motives is sort of important. And I'm counting on you to make the connection to your field here in terms of the end user who will actually be traveling or who is looking at a website to think about traveling. These motives are also at work for the end user, or the client, I guess you might say. So for Maslow, people are both what we are. We're actual people doing what we're doing now. But we also are potential. This is where Vygotsky said the same thing, actually. We're both ability and capability. On one side is the actual. This is the person who is like you are now. You have deficiency needs. These are limiting. They're limiting to you in some way. They're creature-like, he said. In this deficiency perspective, motivation is like reducing the tension. So the picture would look something like this. You're motivated to do something, like eat. You eat, the tension goes down, and you're flat. So motivation to reduce the tension that you feel. I don't feel much love. I'm gonna go do something or hug somebody or send them a note, and then I feel love. And feels good. So that's deficiency motivated. It's important to say it's not bad to be deficiency motivated. It's human. It's a part of what it means to be human. But on the other side are these being needs, the aspirations we have, what could be. He says these are like godlike qualities. And motivation here is to become self-actualized. And the line should be straight and continuous for this sort of motivation, sort of like the flower here, it grows. It doesn't stop, you don't reach a place where you stop growing. You're always growing until you die. By the way, if you have questions or comments, feel free to jump in, or thoughts, connections. Maslow said when we're motivated by deficiencies, we tend to not see very clearly. When we're motivated by being or growing, we tend to see things clearly. When those lower order needs are met, our perception becomes clear. So it's sort of like these two pictures here. He said, do we see the real, and I think this applies to travel, do we see the real concrete world, or do we see our own system of rubrics, motives, expectations, abstractions, which we've projected onto the real world? Do we see, or are we blind? He also put this on a continuum, where on the left, is what we were just talking about this at lunch, is a sense of safety. And on the right is the sense of growth. And we're always somewhere on this continuum, going from hugging our mom's leg to running away from her and exploring things. And so the safe side will look at all the things that are dangerous and minimize what's attractive. I don't want to run out, it's dangerous out there, I'm staying here, I want to be safe. The growth side says, yeah, it's not that bad. Look at all that stuff we've got to do, let's go. So the traveler could fit these different places. We might say that the tourist, and I've picked a very stereotypical picture of the tourist who comes and says, keep me in my bubble that's just like my home, and please don't make me do anything that is not what I would, I want the coffee like I have it at home, I want the food to come just like, the hotel needs to be air conditioned, and I'm speaking from the American perspective now. So that would be on the left side, and maybe somewhere in the middle is someone we might call a traveler who is willing to take independently a map and figure it out. I don't need a guide, I can try it, I'm going to step out and do something a little bit risky. And then maybe on the far end would be someone adventuring out to do something even more bold and off the path that even local people might not do. So I think Maslow provides a very interesting motivation perspective, maybe my favorite for looking at how motivation influences the traveler and the sense of safety and security in terms of where we're willing to extend ourselves or not. I always liked this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He wrote in an essay called Circles. It's got a couple of words that aren't even used in regular English anymore, but he said that the one thing we seek with insatiable desire is to forget ourselves, to be surprised out of our propriety, to lose our sempiternal memory, and to do something without knowing how or why, in short, to draw a new circle. And I think this is about motivation, and I think it's about motivation to expand our lives, and I think for traveling, we're seeking to expand ourselves in some way, to draw a new circle in this way. I think it sort of captures what Maslow was writing about and saying. Any questions on that so far?
No, I believe if we go back to the hierarchy of motivations, I mean, most of the narratives we read and we analyze in both, let's say, official websites, for instance, of hotels or destinations, or in online travel reviews written by actual tourists, they cover most of those elements. I mean, don't go there, it's not safe, the food is very bad, the people do not treat you the right way, etc. Up to the point, I mean, I felt a new life, being a new person, being sort of regenerated. That's the idea of regeneration.
Right. Good. So a next theory that really came out of the humanism movement that Maslow was a part of is called self-determination theory. It answers the question, to what extent do I feel competent, related, and autonomous? And the answers to that question will dictate, to some extent, how motivated we are. And the self-determination theorists look at motivation in terms of the continuum from extrinsic things that are motivated from the outside and to intrinsic, things are motivated from within. How do we get from feeling extrinsically motivated to being intrinsically motivated? They say it's by filling 3 needs, just 3 needs, and these are the needs. The need to feel autonomous. If I feel like someone else is controlling me, I'm going to be on this end of the continuum. But if I feel like I'm self-authoring, I'm deciding what I want to do and doing it, I'm moving toward an intrinsic end. So autonomy is, do I fully endorse what I'm doing right now? Is this what I want to be doing? The second need is competence. And this is really a sense of being capable. If I don't feel capable, my skills aren't good, I feel like everyone else is acting on me. Everyone's motivating me from the outside. They're telling me what to do. I don't feel very good at what I'm doing. So I'm just doing it because people are telling me to, but not because of a sense of competence. But if I feel really competent about what I'm doing and I have skills, I'll be more likely to be intrinsically motivated. The third need is the need to feel connected to other people. So it's those of you who said, I travel to meet people. That's a need for relatedness. I need to know people. When I'm feeling connected to people and valued by them, I'm more intrinsically motivated. When I feel disconnected and isolated, it feels like the world is acting on me. So these 3 things, these 3 needs are considered primary for becoming intrinsically motivated and therefore self-determining. So we might look at pictures. Again, very dangerous to look at pictures and assume what the motivation was, but you might look at this child and say, there's some extrinsic motivator here. His parents are taking him on a trip. So he's got at least some extrinsic factors that are motivating him, as we almost all do. It's almost never purely intrinsic. If you really self-examine, there's probably some extrinsic part of our motive. You might look at her and think she's intrinsically motivated. Hard to know. I just put these here just for thinking about. I picked this picture because this child is putting stamps in a book from where she's going. I met someone recently. I was in South Carolina, which is in the southeastern, it's bordering Georgia. I met someone who had a state parks book. It was like a passport for all the state parks in the state of South Carolina, and she was so proud. She was showing me, like an adult, showing me, like, I just got a stamp yesterday. Today we're going to this one so I can get my second stamp. She's being extrinsically motivated. She's somewhat choosing that, but she's also doing it for some extrinsic reward. So it's kind of interesting. So that's self-determination theory. You can see that because it is a needs-based theory, it's very closely linked to what we talked about with Maslow. Shifting a little bit is this theory called expectancy value theory. And there are only there are 2 major components to this, which is we're motivated when we expect good things to happen and when we value what we're doing. So if we look at that in terms of outcome expectations, you might look at this woman and think she's having a pretty positive expectation for what might happen. She's probably going to be motivated. We're just going to make some assumptions based on the picture we see. But this one, on the other hand, has been exposed to information that is making her less optimistic. So her outcome expectations are not so favorable. She would be less likely to take a trip. She's concerned about war and chaos and theft and danger and violence. On the other side, there are 4 aspects to value, to how we value something. The first aspect is called attainment value, and this refers to the importance we attach to doing well or to doing a task. So for this woman in the first picture, she might be attaining something from her participation in this event. It's bringing her some attainment. The same for the person doing yoga or meditating. It's actually giving me something to partake in meditation. I'm attaining for it, so it's valuable. The second part of value is just an intrinsic interest. Do I find this interesting? Is it enjoyable? And here we see all sorts of interest in travel. It is because I enjoy it. It's not rocket science to say we're motivated to do things we enjoy and we're not motivated to do things that we don't think are fun. So, but there are exceptions to that. Sometimes we are motivated to do things that are not fun. So it's a complex part of motivation. The third part of value is utility value. Is it useful? Does it serve me in the future? Do I get a degree? Do I do a study abroad because, oh, well, it looks good on my resume to do a study abroad. It will look good to say that I've been to Africa. They might be more likely to hire me. So I value it because it's going to bring me something. And the fourth is perceived cost. So it's sort of the opposite. It is part of value, but it's how much will this cost me? And it could be physical cost, it could be monetary cost, psychological cost. So this is expectancy value theory in a nutshell. Our motivation is based on what we expect to happen and how we value the activities that we're doing. Both of the people who have written about this theory the most emphasize the importance of socialization. So how we are socialized to value something. We all hold different values in this room, and part of your values have been given to you by the people who take care of you and the people you're around. So we can look at these two pictures and think about how a child might be differently socialized to travel or not to travel. I was around some people. I've been in France for the past week, and the person I was staying with doesn't travel at all. She's a PhD student, graduate, works in the university, but she doesn't like to travel. She just said, well, we didn't travel much when I grew up, and so, I don't know, I have everything I need, you know. It's kind of interesting. So that's expectancy value theory. Isn't it great? You're getting a whole semester's class on motivation in one slideshow. By the way, there are books on these, you know, each one. Not each one, but some of them. Okay, so others have framed motivation around the idea of goals. So I could have started our meeting today and said, what is motivation? And you might have said it is to be trying to achieve a goal. We set a goal, we say I want to do this, and we do it. It becomes motivating. They're motivating because they direct our attention. You know, I want to run a marathon. If I say that as my goal, I become very focused on, okay, I better start running. I don't want to run marathons. They energize us when they're challenging enough. They lead us to persist, and they activate our prior knowledge. So goals can be very motivating. So that's just goal setting, and it answers the question, what do I want to accomplish? But then there's a goal orientation also. And this is really interesting when you think about travel. This is why I decided to keep this series in, because I think it's interesting. Why am I doing this? So I have a goal, but why am I doing it? So goal orientation folks have separated goals into two large categories. One is mastery, and the other is performance. Mastery goals would be with a focus to self-improve. I want to master something, I want to get better at it, I want to understand it. And here are just some examples of mastery goals that people might have for traveling. I just love to travel, or I want to learn new things. I just want to grow. Notice there's nothing to perform here. There's nothing to demonstrate to someone else. It's just for the love of doing it. Do you see how this is similar to intrinsic motivation? These theories, they overlap. Performance goals, on the other hand, are to demonstrate competence to others. So, or to yourself. It could be to demonstrate competence. Like I might say, I'm going to run to the other end of the building in 10 seconds. I'm going to see if I can do it. That's a performance goal, because I've got a performance in mind. So, I might want to be the best traveled person, or to show people how much I've done and all the places I've gone, or to get the stamps in my passport, or to see as many places as I can. So those are goal orientations. There are two other orientations that we can have in our goals. One is to go towards something, so these are approach goals. Openness, I want to go at it. And the other is to move away from, or to avoid. Avoidance goals are also very strong. So we can have a motive to avoid. Now let's see if we can take an example and put these a 2x2 goal framework together. So we might have a goal orientation that is mastery approach or mastery avoidance. Let's take an example, it'll help. So let's take the Colosseum. I plan to see this next week for the first time. So I figured I would take this as my example. So what might be the motivation to go see the Roman Colosseum? A mastery approach orientation might be, I want to learn as much as I can about Roman culture. I just want to learn. I'm approaching it because I want to master it and I'm interested in it. A mastery avoidance, and this is a hard one to understand, but this is when we want to avoid not mastering something. We want to avoid our own lack of knowledge. And I think often PhD students, high-achieving people have mastery avoidance goals. I'm doing this so that I don't feel like I don't know. Okay, so to avoid being ignorant. Performance goals, I want to share this with my Facebook friends. I want to show people that I went there. I mean, look, I even found this picture. Show your friends where you've been. This can be really motivating. There's messages like this all over the internet, like the country maps of all the places I've been and stuff. Very much a performance approach. I want to show you how great I am. On the other hand, a performance avoidance goal would be, I didn't want to show people how I don't travel. So I went to the Colosseum to avoid looking like I never go anywhere. Or, that I was the only person in my family who'd never seen it. In the academic world, we talk about a performance avoidance would be, I did my homework so that my teacher, to avoid being called on by my teacher, and like, you didn't do your homework again? And this can be a very powerful motive, but it's always, this one down here, negatively associated with outcomes. So it always leads to bad news. Kids who are motivated with performance avoidance goals tend to achieve much lower than kids who are motivated otherwise. So I just think this is an interesting framework for looking at why we do what we do, why we're going somewhere. See, it's not that bad. We're already at the fifth one. And this is the one that I work in the most. This is a social cognitive theory. And those of you are you coming to Francesca's defense tomorrow, maybe? You'll hear her talk about this more. Social cognitive theory is more than a theory of motivation. It's a theory of how humans function. Big theory. And Albert Bandura, who's still living, he's at Stanford, he has talked about human functioning in terms of three categories. What we do, behavior, what's going on within us, like what we bring into the world, and our belief systems, our personal factors, and our environment. So in terms of travel, our behaviors could be how I act, what I eat, how I eat, where I go, how I dress, what I look at, what I say. Environment because I actually think in this context it's a very important environmental variable.
Like choosing a hotel is one of the most important ones.
Yeah, whether you have access to
Yeah.
internet or not. Right. So just in terms of choosing a hotel, and I'll draw the lines in a minute, but you can see now right away that your environment will influence your behavior. And then the personal stuff is the beliefs, your own experience you've had, how you feel, whether you're a man or a woman, how old you are, your ability status, your ethnicity, your family, it could be all of these things. So all of these factors are dynamically interacting all the time. So if we just take an example like where will I stay in a hotel, my environment dictates that to some extent. Do I have internet? If I do, my behavior will be different. But then I also have personal factors like, well, I only stay in 4-star hotels because they feel like home, or they're comfortable, or maybe a personal factor we were just talking about is I want to give to the local community. So that becomes a belief system that makes a difference with how I behave. If I want to give back, then I will only look at locally owned hotels, let's say. So these factors interact. But what Bandura emphasized is that humans have a great potential to direct their lives, to become architects of their destinies. That's kind of a nice phrase. By the beliefs that they have, by their own personal influence. And this is important because other psychological theories did not have personal in the model at all. It's not that they said we don't have feelings, but behaviorism, as a theory of psychology, if you're familiar with that, did not have the personal factors in the model. Behavior is dictated by environment. With the right environment, we can get the person to behave in a certain way. It doesn't matter what the person's thinking. That's just noise. So Bandura is saying, no, the human has a great capacity. He said that people's level of motivation, how they feel, and what they do are actually based more on what they believe than on what is objectively true. So we can look at that here in terms of how beliefs matter. So we have an objective reality, and then we have beliefs, right? Or this. At the core of these beliefs, he said, and the big motivator is our beliefs in our personal efficacy. He called it self-efficacy. And this refers to the beliefs in our capabilities to do something. It answers the question, can I do this? This is a very important motivating question. Because if we doubt that we can do it, we might not do it. So here's a guy, let's say he's coming to Lugano, and he asks himself, can I figure out cultural norms? Can I communicate in Italian? Can I figure out how to get around in this place? Maybe he doesn't, speak the language. So these are 3 types of self-efficacy beliefs about language, about culture, about his ability to self-regulate in his environment. All of these beliefs will have some influence on what he ends up doing. So where do these beliefs come from? I mean, we all have them. We have them about everything. We have them about, can I write this dissertation? Can I write this thesis? It's your thesis writing self-efficacy. Or can I write a big paper? Or can I finish this project? Do I have what it takes? Can I do it? We ask ourselves the question a lot, more than we think. So where does it come from? Bandura says that it comes from 4 different major sources. The first is, have we done it before? So if we think back to the guy in the previous picture, if he's been in another country before and he did okay, he'll probably have a sense that he can do it here in Lugano too. Okay, well, I went to the States and I survived, and mastery experience. Okay. The second source is one that you see other people doing it, and this is particularly important in the ICT field. is watching, because you have access to watching many, many thousands of models who have done it before. Watching someone else do it, especially when that person is like you, can change your sense of what you can do. You know, oh, well, if my neighbor did it, and we grew up here, and she did it, I can do it, you know. If you went to South Africa, you know, probably similar, I could probably go. Tell me what you did, how did it work? So our vicarious experience is the second source. And then people can tell us, hey, you can do this, you're gonna have a great time, go, do it. These are social messages, social persuasions. You have what it takes that come from our environment. And then the fourth source is just how we feel. If every time I walk into a store, I get nervous and I start sweating and I might think, I can't survive here. I can't stay here. I've got to leave. So this feeling that we have, the physiology, affects our sense of what we can do. So that's where self-efficacy comes from. And then we can also look at what self-efficacy influences. I mentioned earlier that it influences our behavior. And I'll just share with you, I don't know the research on travel self-efficacy per se, but I know it in many other fields, education in particular. And so the students with higher self-efficacy are more likely to be engaged, meaning to be doing the activity. Here you see somebody, you know, maybe renting a bike in the local culture. I think it requires a sense of efficacy to do that. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. People with higher self-efficacy persist when they have difficulty. They tend to be more interested. So if I feel like I can do it, I'm going to be more interested in doing it. They tend to set higher goals. So a sense of efficacy is also predicting other motives, other motivating factors. And then they tend to make the choice to go, to do something. They tend to be more likely to choose. So we've looked at 5 different theories of motivation. All of them have beliefs in them to some extent. Some focus more on needs. Some focus more on goals, values. Self-efficacy and outcome expectations are similar. They're focused on, you know, can I do this? And then what will I get if I do it? So all of these could be motivating factors for why we will travel. So at this point, let's just pause, and do you have any questions or thoughts about these theories of motivation? Anyone make a personal connection as you were listening? Did you think, oh yeah, or does any one of those theories seem to you to be maybe better in terms of explaining?
I really like that piece about the avoidance. I never heard about this, but this is so true. Sometimes you do really. This is what I did before going to South Africa. I really invested time on studying about the history and the political situation because I didn't want to seem ignorant at the dinner table.
Right. So that's a performance avoidance goal. Yeah. Yeah. Those are powerful. There's those social goals. That how will I appear? And you probably had mixed motives for that. You probably also, a little bit at least, want to know, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah, in tourism, many times, several elements, especially when it comes to needs, are connected in the hedonic, under the hedonic terms. I mean, people wish to feel, let's say, fitness or being realized while eating at all the levels. So it might be just because they want to eat something, that the taste is great, and the culture behind it, and the way they understand the culture of the local community is something they can grasp by eating local food or drinking local wine, and in the end their perception of themselves is an enlarged one. I mean, the outer circle saying they understand they are more complete or more experienced or more themselves in a sense. So through the term hedonic or hedonistic, they try to combine all the elements.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you describe that, it seems more three-dimensional than two-dimensional. It seems like multi-layered motives for why we do what we do. Not only does this taste good, but it represents a cultural background that someone's mother made it, and that now it has more meaning. It's not just that it tastes good, but someone made it for me, and they live here, and they know this land, and yeah, there's more to it.
Yeah, for instance, I mean, Elena and others have just conducted research about oriental rabbis, about agri-tourism experiences, so people going to a farm and living there. And what you see, most of the cases are comments about the host themselves, because they are farmers. I mean, they cultivate, but they host you, they interact with you a lot, etc. So it's that feeling of sort of becoming friends. So having not an economic relationship, but a friendship in a sense. And the second side is food. So immediately after, the second most commented element is the taste of food, and the food as one of the best representations of a local culture. And again, because the food has been, I mean, ingredients have been cultivated by your host, have been handmade and prepared by your host, are being served by your host, and are being framed by your host. I mean, the host is providing the narratives about the food. I mean, I was taught by my grandmother, I learned how to cook this when I was very young. In our region, we cook this way. If you go a few kilometers that direction, they cook it in another way, etc. So
yeah, that's interesting. It makes me think of self-determination theory and their emphasis on our need for relatedness.
Yes.
Because I think that experience being on a farm or in an agro-tourism setting, agritourism, I think, it makes us feel more connected. But I think there's even something bigger. It's something connected to ourselves. Something like, wait, I'm from this earth, and this is of the earth, and this is, yeah, I think there's something even beyond that, which I'll get to at the end. So part 2 is about learning, but it's also about motivation too, because I think one of the things that I haven't said yet is that we're often motivated because of our cognition. Like we need to know. And that can be a very important motivating force, our need to know. How long can you stand it when you don't remember something or you don't know something in a conversation? Before you look, you're already doing it. I gotta Google this. Yeah, what, like 10 seconds now? 10 seconds is too long, right? We call this cognitive dissonance, where there's a gap between what I know now and what I need to know. We really don't like it. It's very motivating to grab a phone or to do whatever we need to do to resolve it. So we'll talk about that, and I just want to talk about 3. I teach a whole class on learning, and I could teach more than one class on learning. There's so many theories of learning. But I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, what are the major processes that change us when we travel? And the first one that came to mind is that when we travel, we have a massive disruption of our habits. Massive. It's big. And that's important. And these are all related, by the way. We also have a shift in our perception. So we have a perceptual shift. This chicken had been in its egg, and then it's out of its egg, and everything changed, you know. And the third is that when we travel, we're making new associations. Lots of them. Many, many, many. It's exhausting. You get really tired when you travel, because you're doing this all the time. And we also, I think, like it for that very reason. Now I'm going to draw on the work of William James, who is one of my favorite, all-time favorite. I have a little love affair with a dead guy. He's considered to be the father of American psychology. And he traveled a lot in Europe, he traveled a lot, period. He lived in the 1800s, and you should read him, he's great. So I'll quote him a lot, so it'll be like you read him. He said that all of our life, so far as it has definite form, is but a mass of habits, practical, emotional, and intellectual, systematically organized for our weal or woe, and bearing us irresistibly toward our destiny, whatever the latter may be. He's making a really big statement here. He's saying you are your habits. All of our life is you're just a mass of habits. How you sit there, what you're thinking right now, how you're holding your pen, how you're interacting with me, it's just your habit. In fact, I spent a whole class period just talking about habits to try to get people to wake up to the fact that we are just so habitual. We do it in the same way every time. And when we fight with people, it's usually that my habits are fighting with your habits. It's not working out because of our habits are up against each other. You always do that. No, I don't. Yes, you do. It's me arguing with your habits. So when we travel, we're thrown off cognitively and because our habits are also thrown off. And I think we like it. And we hate it at the same time. It's a paradox. So here are just some ways that we look at the different habits that we might be faced with culturally. I started riding my bike to work after I went to Amsterdam for the first time. Because I came home and I was like, well, if everybody in Amsterdam can ride a bike to work, why can't I ride a bike to work? Just because no other Americans do it. I'm not sure what these guys are doing really. This is my most recent culture shock. It happens every time I come here, you know. I'm expecting that, and then I get this, and so it's habits. But wait, every morning I have my big coffee, and it takes me, 20 minutes to drink it. But now this one's one sip and I'm done. It's like, what do I do? You know. And so it's great. We're just up against all these things that we go, oh yeah, that's not how I would do it. Oh no, I don't do it that way. So it becomes a self-reflective tool when we're disrupted in our habits. So just to emphasize this point a little bit further, James gives a quotient, a ratio. He says that 99 hundredths or possibly 999 thousandths of our activity is purely automatic and habitual, from our rising in the morning to our lying down each night. So if you have a pie chart, and I usually do this activity at the beginning of my class, I say, draw a circle and divide it into two categories that represent everything you do in life. One category is habit, the things you do habitually, and the other is things you do by free will. You take a conscious decision to do it. And they end up being 50-50, 60-40, sometimes 70-30, but never 99-1 or 0.999. Occasionally there'll be somebody who just draws one circle and says it's all habit, there's no free will. But James is saying, and James wrote a whole chapter on free will, on will, and he said that its small proportion is not indicative of its significance. In other words, that little 0.01% is extremely important in our lives, very important. So he didn't say we have no free will. He said the free will is important. When we make a decision to do something, that changes the course of the boat that we're driving in life. But the rest of the time, it's just our habits that are carrying us along. So again, I think travel is so important to the learning process because it forces us to look at, examine, change, confront our habits. And so to put this a bit further, James gave a series of talks to teachers in Cambridge, in Massachusetts. He was at Harvard, and he talked to them about what they should know about psychology. So somebody said, hey, you're a psychology professor, can you talk to the teachers and tell them what they need to know? And he gave like 10 talks. And in one of his talks, it's only about habit, the whole talk. And he says to them, education is just the organization of habits. That's what it means to be educated. The most educated person is the one who has the best system of habits. Kind of interesting. And if you think about a child and what you do at school, it's mostly teaching habits. I want you to do this, and then I want you to do that. Or no, don't sit like that, sit like this. And it's also how to react, emotional habits, how to behave. He says our education means, in short, little more than a mass of possibilities of reaction acquired at home, at school, and I think as we travel, for how we can act in a certain situation. Yeah.
Pose one question, because isn't education also the way we acquire habits?
It is. Yeah, it is. That's why he said acquired. Well, yeah. So he's talking to teachers, yeah, acquired at home and at school.
Yeah.
So he has other talks where he talks about how do we then teach habits. In fact, when he talks about habits and he says, you know, don't allow an exception to occur until you have the habit in place. So he talks about how to teach someone a new habit. Yeah. That's the hopeful message, is that we can change our habits, but soon our habits have us. We are them. We don't even see them, you know. We're very blind to our own ways of doing things. It's great. Habits is great to talk about. And it's fun when you think about, when you go to another culture, how often you're tired because your habits are not there. Nothing's automatic. Nothing's automatic. You go, wait, I have to pay to park, but I don't know where to pay. Do I pay the person or machine, or is it a ticket? And then there's like 100 decisions to make just to get your parking ticket. Because there's nothing automatic anymore. Everything you have to, or you go to the grocery store and you go, do I start here? Do I start here? You know, how does it work? How do I weigh the vegetables? Everything's a little decision. So, another process is how we change our perception, or how we see things differently. And I've come across, in preparing for this, I looked through hundreds of quotations about travel, and I looked at what was similar about them. And this is one that I picked out. I was going to just put a ton of quotations in here about travel, but I have a few. Does anybody speak French? Yeah? Do you want to read it?
En français? Le véritable voyage de découverte ne consiste pas à chercher de nouveaux paysages, mais à voir de nouveaux lieux.
Do you know what it means?
Yes. The true exploring travel is not looking for a new landscape, but having new eyes.
Yeah. To have to look at things differently.
Yeah.
So you know, it could be deeper than even traveling somewhere, that we can actually change our perspective right here without going anywhere. This one's good too. That one's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things. And I think that's often true. I think our motives to travel come from a desire to see things differently. I need to just see my world differently. For me, that happens every time, even when I come to Europe again and again, every time I come, something changes. My problems seem smaller, you know, the things back at home, and everything just gets put in a different perspective. And one of the reasons that we do that, or one way that we change our perception when we travel, has to do with what we can put on a chart here. So we have skill levels, like what we can do, our abilities. We might be low to high. We also have a challenge. So when we travel, we're often met with high challenge. If we don't have a lot of skill, but the challenge is high, like if we don't speak the language and the challenge is high, we experience anxiety. It's like, oh gosh, I don't even know what to do here, and it requires a lot of me. On the other hand, when we have a lot of skill, but low challenge, we're bored. Do you know this chart? Have you seen this before? Yeah. Do you know what I'm going for? So where things get interesting though is when our skill level and the challenge meet each other. So on the slope here, and especially up at the top. So there's been a researcher who's written about this and calls it flow. Flow is when we get lost when we're doing something. Because our challenge is in proportion to the skills that we bring, and it's like perfect engagement. And this is when our perception changes. We lose track of time. We're so engaged. So here are a couple of people who might be in flow, I don't know. But they're very deeply engaged. They might just be reflecting. Often you see flow being someone climbing a mountain. You know, you've got to be engaged at that time. You're maximally challenged and at your skill level. So this is flow. Well, the characteristics of flow are highly focused attention. I've got to be paying attention to this. A changed perception of time. Sometimes time goes really slow. Like a day, like I've been in Europe now for a week, but it seems like I've been here a month. It just seems like I've been here a long time. It seems like a long time ago I left home. So my time's off, and I think that has something to do with the perception of flow. Sometimes though, it seems like time passes really fast. You know, when you're watching a movie or something and it's really good, and you look up and you're like, it's done? It just started. Or maybe you're sitting there going, this never happens to me. Which is unfortunate, but I think we like flow experiences. Artists have many flow experiences. But I think this has to do with part of our travel. So let's talk about new associations. Back to William James and his talks to teachers. So he says that we are just little pieces of associating machinery. We're always making associations. This is like that. And the reason we're doing that is because we are practical people. We just want to adapt to our situation. So this is called functionalism. I just want to adapt. What is functional? My beliefs, my associations have a function, and their function is to keep me alive so that I don't die. The bottom function is, can I so we're going through our lives, we're going in front of the Taj Mahal, and we're making connections, we're asking questions of what is this like? What's missing here? Or what will happen next? And we do this in lots of situations. If we walked into a room like this, what would be the appropriate behavior? Maybe we don't know. In a highly unfamiliar context, like, do I take my shoes off? Do I walk in saying, hi everyone, or do I come in quiet? So our first place to go is, where have I been that's like this? What's similar? What is this connected to? What does this remind me of? This might be more familiar. Again, we're trying to make associations. What do I know? Where does this connect? It's a schema, right? And earlier I was talking about our desire for cognitive equilibrium. This is the opposite of cognitive dissonance, which is what you grab your phone, to resolve. So this comes from a Swiss psychologist. Anybody know who this is? Oh, Jean Piaget. So he's the father of cognitive constructivism, this idea that we're building constructs mentally in our minds by making connections to things all the time as we're going through our lives. And our motive for that is to balance it out. It's like homeostasis. We want to balance things out again. The teacher's job, and I think what happens during travel, is to throw things off balance, is to create cognitive dissonance. Because to do that is to create motivation. We were talking at lunch today about this gap, and where you want to target teaching is to the gap, where it's slightly uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable that the student just says, I don't know. You just want it to be slightly challenging. Piaget called this the optimal mismatch between what you know and what you don't know. Vygotsky and others have called this the zone of proximal development. It's a zone that it's between what we can do now and what we can do with a little bit of help. And that's where we should be. In language learning, we talk about what we can understand plus 1, not plus 100. Because we go, whatever, I don't know. So cognitive equilibrium. So humans are trying to reach cognitive equilibrium, and they do this by connecting what is new with what is old. Okay, so I encounter something new while I'm traveling, and it bothers me because it's new and it makes me nervous. Oh, it's like, so this happened to me yesterday. So I put this in here. We were coming to Lugano, and I saw this sign. I did not see that sign, I just saw the word. What is this word?
Lavoro.
Okay, and I thought to myself, I guess I saw the sign a little bit after. I thought, oh, it looks like labor. And often the V and the B can be used, interchangeably, so it must be work. It's just a little baby example of how meeting something that creates cognitive dissonance. I don't know what that is. What could that be? I just go to something that I do know. Try to make a connection. So kids do this all the time, right? The child looks at the animal and says, dog. But of course, that's wrong, right? So we do this by connecting the new with the old, or by adding a new category. And this is how our networks begin, and they get more complex. So this child adds the new category, cat. Piaget called these assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is fitting the new with the old. Accommodation is creating a whole different category. And when we travel, we do both of those so that we stay alive. We're adapting to our world. And eventually, everything gets very complex. I don't know what this is, it's just a picture of connections, but if you look at the colors, you might think, maybe green is your environment at home, and maybe red is your environment somewhere else that you travel. And you make many connections between them. So what does that mean about what it means to be smart, or educated, or to learn? So James said the process of education may be described as nothing but the process of acquiring ideas or conceptions, the best educated mind being the mind who has the largest stock of them, ready to meet the largest possible variety of emergencies in life. The people who travel, and you know this because you have traveled, you're more ready to deal with a lot of different situations because you've been out and you've had all of these connections. I think that's one of the reasons we like to travel, is we feel more equipped to deal with the emergencies of life. It's like, oh, that's like this. I can deal with that. It's familiar. So this idea of associations in learning, I think, is really important. So habits, perception, associations. So I just want to close with a couple of thoughts about how we are changed after we travel. And in preparing for today, I did a little informal research. I was talking to the people I know who are close to me, the researchers' friends, and asking, so why do you travel? And not telling them what I was doing. So I just wanted to know, listen from them, or what do you get out of traveling? And I was asking what motivates you, and what I realized in their responses is that people told me things that, in retrospect, benefited them. But it wasn't the initial motive. So there was a different initial motive, and then at the end there was an appreciation of additional things that travel brought that I think become motives for future travel. So it's kind of cyclical. Well, this is a little dark, but it says, no one realizes how beautiful it is to travel until he comes home and rests his head on his old familiar pillow. I do think there's a retrospective and maybe even a latent, meaning, you know, time has to pass and then you get the benefit. You might not feel it the moment you land, but maybe in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, those associations keep working for us after we travel. So how does travel change us? So 4 years ago, I came to Grenoble, France, and I was working with some university folks and someone in the school system in Grenoble who does cultural exchanges. And he said, we were working on a research project, but he said, hey, I have a 15-year-old son, and I would really like for him to live in the United States. Could he live with you? Single woman, you know? I'm like, well, I was kind of looking for an adventure, so I said, yeah, why not? You know, like just a few months. He just said, just like 2 months, 3 months. So that's how I got to welcome Hugo, a French boy, to Lexington, Kentucky. He's from Aubenas, which is a very small town in the middle of the Ardèche in the southern central France. We didn't know each other well at all. And last week, it was funny, I was going back to Grenoble and I got an email just before leaving from Hugo, who said, so he came to the United States, he stayed for 3 months. He said, hey, I would really like to Skype with you. I just was thinking about how great it was to stay with you and I want to talk to you. I said, hey, why don't we get together and have dinner? I'm going to be in France. So we had dinner last week. And then he sent me an email after dinner in which he explained why he'd like to travel. So I'm going to share with you what he wrote to me in his email. So this is Hugo, and on the left, that's him in Lexington, in my house, doing the crêpe. He was having a little cultural party for us. And then this is him last week in Grenoble. He's changed a bit, he's 18 now. And he wrote a lot of stuff, but one of the things he wrote was, you get to know yourself. The questioning about the others comes back to you as in a mirror. Then you ask, who am I? What am I doing? What am I useful for? I seriously ask myself these ones. But he was very deep about this when we had dinner last week. He was talking to me about the benefits of traveling and how, at first, his dad made him go. He said, my dad just told me I needed to go, and I just came. He said I was a really shy boy, and when I came back, I didn't know, but I became outwardly focused. He had a personality change, according to him, that now he's willing to go up and try things with people. So he saw benefits after traveling that, you know, he was extrinsically motivated to travel, but in the end, benefited a great deal. Another friend of mine who's a professor, Mike, sent me this through email, and I thought it was really beautiful. He lived in Japan for a year, so he speaks Japanese fluently. So I think it's important to say, you know, this is an experienced traveler. He said, travel presents complex challenges as I encounter in no other aspect of my life. It reveals who I am in ways that nothing else does. Travel illuminates both the path behind and possible avenues ahead. It reveals skills, strengths, and beauty I had not known I possess, while refusing to gloss over the hideous. It introduces me to myself. Right. I think there's something to that when we travel, we put ourselves in relief, like on a map, up against something else. And often we become aware of what we take for granted in our everyday lives. I've never felt more American than I do when I'm in Europe. I don't feel American at home, I'm just, you know, doing my thing. It's like the fish in water. So you become more aware of who you are, I think, when you travel and you see different things. T.S. Eliot wrote, the poet, he wrote, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started, and know the place for the first time. So in closing, I like this one from Emerson. Though we travel the world over to find the beautiful, we must carry it with us or we find it not. So I think travel gives us an opportunity to do some exploring of ourselves that we're unable to do or feel like we're unable to do without traveling. I think in the end, I think there's a very strong self, as you were saying, and I said I would come back to, motive to get to know who we are deep down, and that maybe those are our deeper motives that we're not always aware of on the surface. Well, I hope that was somewhat helpful to you and give you some things to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
We want to travel.
I know, doesn't it make you want to travel? Let's go.
Yeah.
Come to the US, come to Lexington. Yeah, we'd love to welcome you. Yeah, Francesca and Samuel got to spend a whole year in Lexington, so I think that year was full of surprises. By the way, Francesca came to Lexington for 2 weeks when Hugo was with me. So I have pictures of the two of them at the horse races and some other events. But that was an important experience for her, I think, in terms of her development. I enjoyed thinking about this. It's putting me, shifting my own research into a new domain, but showing me where it's relevant and where it's not.
I had one thought about the learning while we're traveling. That's what I have paid attention during the last trip that I did, the last few trips. So before, like a few years ago, while I was preparing my trip, I studied a lot in advance, like I studied. So you learn a lot about the history and the geography and everything. And now actually, I study more when I come back. So I leave myself, I know something is going to Malaysia, I know something, I know where it is, I know where the capital. And then you go enjoy and you meet people and you have your first perception of the country and then you go back to the history. I think it changes some, like you read the history and the geography in a different way after you saw that. So
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. It's almost cold at the beginning, isn't it? It's
yeah,
like you're
just
reading it out of context.
Yeah, you don't pay attention to the details. And then the history is like, yeah, okay, but as we studied, that's cool, especially from the faraway countries. But when you have been there, you understand much better the social changes that happened.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, that's good.
observation.
That's good. I traveled with, when I was a teacher, I took trips with my students to France twice. They were 5th and 6th grade students, so like 10 to 12 years old. Really young to be traveling to France, really. But that was also an interesting experience. We were going very much as tourists. I wasn't the tourist, but they were. And we tried to teach them things before we went, so that they would be culturally aware when we arrived. And I think, like you, what you're saying, I bet they learned more when they came back than they did before.
They have associations, so they bring
That's right.
back to what they have seen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Asta, say a few words about your Africa.
Yeah.
Just came back from Africa.
Reflecting exactly about one experience, and that I was very grateful that I read something before. It was I went on the one World Heritage Site, which is Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was in prison.
Yeah.
And the guide was terrible. I mean, he didn't explain any. He just brought to the places. Just gave some facts, and then it was very, for me, what you're saying, how to associate. And then I was grateful that I read things, and then seeing that cell, and then associating to what I read, really put me in a very. I really experienced it much deeper way.
So
But I know how to.
It was good
with
to
a good.
read.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it works both ways, doesn't
I
it?
think that.
And for different people maybe.
If you think all the literature in marketing and place branding, actually they are working mainly on the concept of association. So, and stereotypical iconic images. So I'm trying to create, anticipate connection and association. So you're more interested to come to visit me and fix those.
And so what is an example of how they would do that? Like what kind of association would they?
So think about Lugano, for instance. One of the main association is instead of projecting images of party people and they're trying to project landscape with a very maybe a lady or a man looking at the lake, and it's so in terms of create those association of relaxed safety.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that's how
Wild
marketing
animals
works,
around.
right? Is try what we want the people to think about when they see these images. I haven't really thought about this from a marketing perspective, so that's useful. Yeah.
Yes, we had a meeting, a faculty meeting last 2 days, and this is one of the problems we encounter while doing promotional activities in the internal part of Switzerland for our university, because they think Lugano is too nice and too funny to go and study there. So they think, if we send our kids there, they won't have time or will to study because it's too nice. They will go around. But yeah, I was thinking when it comes to digital technologies, we have something like we have two cases in which they might become an obstacle. I mean, we are very happy and focused on the fact that digital technologies, they can help a lot in the travel experience, but there are a couple of situations where they might be a very big obstacle. One is the fact that one of the most intriguing experiences people usually got out of traveling, far away, is that you can get lost. And nowadays, if you have a portable phone, you cannot get lost. So there is no chance to get lost, which is, a big damage, because that was really a turning point in your experience. You lose all your references. You need to create all the connections and everything.
Right.
And so it's a very, sort of you go somehow even beyond your zone of proximal development, and you need to find a solution in a reasonable amount of time.
So are you saying that it's less likely now that we'll be in that situation, that a traveler will be in that situation?
Yeah, and it's almost impossible, because if you have a connection to the internet and a GPS system, even if you are dying in the middle of the ocean, you know where you are. So there is no chance of not knowing where you are. And the other element is designing sort of pampering system. Thinking for instance of mobile apps. Most of the mobile apps in tourism are sort of pampering you, asking what do you like. So for instance, you could say, okay, I like shopping and fish, and wherever you go, the system will show you shopping malls and fish restaurants and nothing else, even if maybe in the local culture shopping is not that important and fish is not the most important part of cuisine, but the app is sort of making you blind to what is around you. So instead of enriching your experience, could sort of damage the possibility you can have of meeting something unknown or something not foreseen.
That's interesting that you say that. It makes so expectancy value theory that says the more we value something, fish and shopping, the more we'll do it, is problematic sometimes. In fact, value can sometimes have an inverse relationship with self-efficacy. So the more capable I feel I am, the less I value that activity because I'm good at it. But the less good I feel at it, the more I want to do it. So I choose things that are hard. So it might have I mean, you're right that if we rely too much on a phone to choose for us, and it would be very interesting to know who does that. Who tends to just say, fish and shopping, just tell me. If we rely too much on it, we will narrow our possibilities, and we won't see as much. But we also are assuming that it's the things that I'm interested in are the things that I'll go toward.
Yeah.
I think going back to that safety continuum, that maybe people who are more willing to grow, move toward the growth side, will be less dependent on their gadgets, their phones and whatnot, than the people who want to be safe. You know, the tourist that I classified on the left, maybe the tourist is the one who's going to be stuck in the phone. I don't know, just a thought.
And connectedness as well. I mean, being connected 24 hours a day means that before, I mean, while traveling, sort of you have left your home, your house, I mean, your friends, your family somewhere, and you are going elsewhere. But if you're 24 hours connected, I mean, with tweets, Facebook, and everything, sort of you do not change the environment. So it might happen that you are in Somaliland, but you are Facebooking, tweeting, and everything, like being in Lugano. And so you have a lot of relatedness and connectedness, but with the same group of people. So
Right.
you are not enlarging or meeting new people
Right.
because you are still fully at home or fully integrated within. And again, it might be an obstacle towards having an enlargement of perspectives or broadening
Yeah.
possibilities.
I was talking to someone about TripAdvisor the other day, and about, he was saying, I never go where TripAdvisor recommends, because that's where everyone will go. So I look at what the most popular place is, and then I choose one that's way down on the list. As a strategy, to stay away from the tourists.
That's interesting.
I know, I thought that was interesting too, because it's
You
counter
have to
to
tell
it.
Carlo.
Terrible.
Yeah, but it could be, you know.
It's also a cliche thing, just to feel that I want to pick the opposite, just to feel and demonstrate that you are, you know.
Or to avoid
Out
the
of the
tourism crowd. Like I think the person was saying more like, I don't want to go where there will be 500 people and they're all Americans, because they all looked at TripAdvisor and that's where they're going. So it's almost,
It's a bit a cliche thing. I mean, you're in, I don't know, you showed for the wall.
yeah.
I don't want to go there. There are a lot of people. Come on.
Yeah, but there will
And
be
then you
people.
are- and
There
you
will
are
be
in
people
a-
who are motivated by that, though,
Yeah,
to avoid
sure.
crowds. Yeah, who will much prefer to be out in the countryside somewhere drinking, you know.
Habits.
Yeah, yeah. Or personality, even. I think that maybe we bring also to the situation of preference.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. In terms of using TripAdvisor or other things, it might not be the most popular that is necessarily going to be the choice. Humans are more complex than that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Any further comment or question? Good. So thank you again.
Yes, thanks.